Hi, I'm Sarah from Your True Self. Thank you for watching my channel today. I wanted to do a video about an audiobook that I've just finished because I think that it raises some important issues that I wanted to discuss. And the book that I have just finished listening to is called By My Side by Alice Peterson. And this is an audiobook that I just discovered while I was browsing on Audible, and I had it as part of my credits quite some time ago. It's not one that I listened to quickly. It actually took me absolutely ages to finish it because I found it initially a little bit badly written, which I'll come on to discuss. But I felt that it had some really important messages that I wanted to discuss. So the premise of the book is about a girl called Cass, who is a third-year medical student at King's, and she is having a normal day with her boyfriend, and fairly near the beginning of the book, in the first few pages, she goes out to the shop, she forgets her wallet. He throws her wallet down from the window of their flat, and she fails to catch it. It bounces into the road, and without thinking, she just steps into the road to pick the wallet up and gets run over. And this leaves her with a spinal cord injury, so she is paralysed from the waist down. So that is the main premise of the book, and it basically follows Cass on her journey through living with having a spinal cord injury and all of the things that it means for her in her life, about the fact that she leaves university and she has to try and decide whether or not to go back to university, about how it affects her relationships both in her family and her friends, and physical sexual relationships that she has, about career things, just about how she copes mentally, and I thought that it raised some really important issues. And the other massive part of the book is that Cass goes on to get an assistance dog called Ticket, who is a working dog who helps her with things like getting things for her, helping her with her shopping, helping her just navigate life without the use of her legs, basically. And that was really interesting, actually, also to learn about how the dogs get trained, how they get matched with partners, about all the training the people need who are looking after the dogs to work effectively together. So that was a really interesting part of the book as well. And one thing that occurred to me is that I actually cannot think of any other books I have ever read where there has been a disabled character, especially a lead character. And I was quite surprised by that because I've obviously read a lot of books, and I literally cannot think of any other books that feature disabilities. So I know there's some books which feature mental health, and there's books which have become quite famous which have featured dementia, like Still Alice and like Elizabeth is Missing. But there's nothing really that I can remember about physical disabilities, and I really learnt so much by listening to this audiobook. So there's some really terrible things which happened to Cass as part of being in a wheelchair. So just one example, without giving away anything important in the plot. For instance, she goes for a job interview and she hasn't phoned ahead to the employer because she thinks, well, surely these days there'll be disabled access for her. So she goes for an interview, she gets there early, she goes to the front door, and there's 5 steps, and she doesn't know what to do because she can't get up the steps, she hasn't got her dog with her, so she has to try and find someone who will carry her up the steps. Then she's thinking, well, what am I going to do if I actually work here, and how am I supposed to get up these steps every day? So she ends up being a bit late for the interview. And then when she gets in, the receptionist is horrible to her because she didn't let them know in advance. She treats her like a massive inconvenience. And in the end, she doesn't even go for the job interview because they are basically just looking at her like, well, how are you going to work here? And it's just so awful. And there's another example of when she goes on a date, and does she tell the person in advance on the internet that she has spinal cord injury or not, and then how they react to that. And one of the most shocking, well, they're all shocking, one of the most shocking things is she's at a party, and because she's obviously not at the same height as the other people at the party, somebody is smoking and just flicks their cigarette ash constantly on her head because they don't look down and see her there. And it was just really eye-opening for me just to think what it must be like for somebody who is disabled and in a wheelchair. And this is, this is me as a person who works in healthcare and comes across people with disabilities very frequently. And so I just thought it was a really important thing to discuss, really, because there's just a real absence of this in literature. And with regards to the actual writing, this is the bit where I felt the book fell down, because the plot points were all there, the research was clearly there, but I didn't think it was particularly well written. And I never know when I think this if it's the actual book or if it's the narrator, because I didn't particularly like the narrator's voice. She made a lot of the characters sound quite comical just by how she portrayed their voices. Like, a lot of the girls seemed quite high-pitched and giggly, and a lot of the boys seemed very, I don't know, quite posh voices, and it just, I think that might have undermined the tone of the book for me. And when I don't like an audiobook, I never know, is it the book or is it the narrator? Because if I'd read this in paper, would I have felt completely differently? Like, one example of that, when I listened to The Essex Serpent, I was really excited because there was so much positive press about The Essex Serpent, and I'm actually from Colchester where the book is set. And when I listened to it, I couldn't stand the narrator's voice. Well, that's maybe a bit too strong. I really didn't like her voice. She got the Essex accent completely wrong, and she pronounced, there's a place called Mersey, and in the book she pronounces it wrong, and that really annoyed me every time. And she kept calling it Mercy when it's actually Mersey. And yeah, I never got the same excitement about The Essex Serpent as everyone else, and I don't know if it was just the narrator that ruined it for me, and if I'd then gone on to read the book, whether I'd have enjoyed it a lot more. So I feel like this wasn't particularly well written, but I don't want to put other people off who might be reading the book, because actually it might just be the narrator who spoilt it for me. So I just wanted to know if there are any other examples that you can think of books that have featured disabilities, or a character who has an illness, I suppose, would fit in the same sort of genre, because I can't think. The only other one I can think of that's come to me now actually is there's a book which was a Booker Prize winner a long time ago. I read it when I was a teenager, called How Late It Was, How Late, by James Kelman, and that was about a guy who was blind, and it was very literary. I don't quite know how I managed to read that when I was a teenager. I think I would have struggled to read it now. And I can't think of any others. So if anyone else can think of any books, then I think it would be good for me to know about them and talk about them, and try and increase people's awareness through that medium. So that was what I wanted to talk about in relation to this book. I will be back for another video talking about my book haul for May and what I've been reading so far this month. So comment down below, and I'll put all the usual links to social media, and speak to you soon. Bye.